Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome, everybody, to a bonus episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists. This episode is part of a special series we're doing in conjunction with Cellerant Consulting Group and their Best of Class Hygiene Award winners. If you're not familiar with this, here's just a little bit of background. Since 2009, there has been a special committee of clinicians that would evaluate as many products and technologies as they could. And the best of the best would be winners of an annual award called the Cellerant Best of Class Technology Award. Now, these clinicians, they were not compensated for their efforts in this evaluation process, which is a really important point because it led to an unbiased, nonprofit, and kind of a transparent process. So realizing, though, that the everyday dental hygienist could also benefit from such a model, Dr. Lou Schumann developed an additional branch for hygiene. So for this special series, our plan is to highlight one winner each episode and dig a little bit deeper into why they won the award. So for this week's episode, we bring on someone you've heard from before on this podcast, representing a company who goes well out of their way to support the dental hygienist. So we're pleased to welcome back Nate Jones from Xlear as we highlight why they won the Cellerant Best of Class Hygiene Award. And special thanks to Brooke Crouch for guest co-hosting. And now, here's the interview.
A tale of two hygienists.
All right, everyone, welcome into this special podcast. I'm so excited for today. You guys have heard the ads on our show. We've had Nate on before as well. Xlear is just a big part of what we do as hygienists. It's a big contributor to, the conference scene. You see them. I saw, Nate, I don't know if you saw the social media of it, but there was the I Spry campaign that kind of went through. It was hilarious. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves what you're doing supporting hygienists, and we're very thankful to have you on. But we have you on specifically today because you've won an award, and it's no surprise, it's no shock to us, but it's the Cellerant Best of Class Award. And, we couldn't be happier that you're a part of this. But what I'd like to do today is I want to talk about what you're excited about. Like what gets you energized about the dental scene and oral health?
Well, what's not to be excited? There's a lot going on that excites me. And, I'm trying to think of how to put this all into 5 minutes because there's a lot. Mm-hmm. But there's all kinds of stuff coming out. And, we've been in the Xylitol business, in the oral hygiene business, and utilizing these non-hexo sugars in hygiene, not just in oral hygiene, but in nasal hygiene. And, we won this award that you mentioned because of the nasal spray that we've been selling for about 22 years. And what really excites me about that is that the dental hygiene space is kind of reaching out and pulling in the nasal hygiene as part of that, because nasal hygiene has never been something that's been discussed in any part of healthcare. The ENTs, ear, nose, and throat doctors, they talk about it offhandedly while they're prescribing, OTC drugs. They're like, hey, you might try this, but, go get some fluticasone and some oxymetazoline and some of this and some of that, which actually goes against the whole concept of hygiene, because what those are doing is those are actually stopping your nose from cleaning itself. Whereas that's really what you want, is you want your nose to clean itself rather than just breathe all this stuff into your lungs. And it just excites me that the oral hygiene, the oral hygienist, and that part of healthcare is actually embracing the nasal hygiene part and pulling that in and actually working with it.
So what do you feel like we need to be learning about as hygienists, and maybe even the doctors that are listening to this? Like, what do we need to be knowing from a scientific level?
The first thing to understand is, even in dental hygiene, we're learning and we're understanding that rather than killing everything, rather than using chlorhexidine on a regular basis, or rather than using high alcohol content mouthwashes or products like that in the mouth, because that leads to bigger problems. If we keep killing off all the bacteria in our mouth, there's a lot of beneficial bacteria. A big part of hygiene is understanding that if we kill off all the good bacteria, bad bacteria are just going to be easier to get in there. And in nasal hygiene, it's the same concept, okay? We have a whole gateway microbiome of bacteria in our mouth. We also have that same type of a microbiome in our nose. And hygiene, I think the future of hygiene is understanding how to manage that microbiome and keep it healthy.
I agree.
I don't know if that answers
Wholeheartedly
the
agree.
question. That is what I think is the future of hygiene.
Well, we talk about microbiomes in so many different components of like in our body, right? So the mouth, the gut, and all the different other parts of the body. I don't think we talk about the microbiome of the nasal passage ever.
No.
We need to, because we've only started talking about the oral microbiome in the last 10, 15 years. We clear, and I don't know, do you guys know who Mark Cannon is, Dr. Cannon?
Oh yeah, we love Dr. Cannon.
So he's working with us, and we're actually doing a deep sequence we went out and got swabs of like, gosh, I want to say 60 people, a bunch of people that have chronic respiratory issues, upper respiratory issues, a bunch of people that are healthy, I think 30 of each. I'm trying to remember the numbers off the top of my head. And we did a deep sequence where we sent this data, or we collected it, swabbed it, and went and did a DNA analysis of all the bacteria and viruses that were in their nose. And we're in the middle of doing that. And we're the first company, we're the first group that has ever done that, which is crazy.
So, I mean, not to be like too basic, but like to what end? Like, are we going to be surprised by how many bacteria and viruses and things that live there harmoniously? Or are we seeing how many pathogens are there?
Tell me how many bacteria you think different types and strains of bacteria. Not how many bacteria, but how many different types and strains. Because I've got a rough number, but it's about 2,500 in the healthy people.
Really?
Wow.
What we're trying to do, and we haven't got there yet, is take the people that are chronically sick and with upper respiratory infections. And what we did is we had them, after we collected the sample from them, we actually had them use Xlear for 30 days. And we swabbed it again and did that. And
the results are pending. Like, we can't talk about the results yet, right?
I don't know what the results are yet.
Okay,
I've got the first part of the results. We don't have the second part. Mark Cannon is pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, he's excited about a lot of things, I think, in healthcare, isn't he?
Yes, I know. I love Mark Cannon.
He's fun to be around, for sure. So let's talk about these bacterial strains for just a quick second, though. Is the goal to reduce the types of bacterial and viral strains, or is it the load of them? Is it the quantity of the bad ones?
That's a good question that we're going to have to, I don't know that I know the answer to that right now, because what I think it is going to be is that we're going to have a bunch of commensal bacteria. We're going to have a bunch of bacteria that actually, so you have commensal bacteria, you have bad bacteria, or pathogenic bacteria, and then you have good bacteria. And the commensal bacteria, they're just, maybe sitting there taking up space, which, so the bad bacteria can't. But that's what we're going to learn. But, the thing that people should stop and think into the bacterial load is if the cleansing mechanism that we have in our nose is actually functioning properly. Because if it's functioning properly, it's going to maintain the correct bacterial load. And what that is, and there's some good videos that you can go on and watch that show how, I'm trying to think of how to describe this, but if you go and you watch some of these videos of the mucociliary clearance cycle in your nose, okay, you have snot, you have, mucus up there in your nose, and it sits on top of these little hairs, the cilia, that move it along. And if we're dry, we're not drinking enough water, if we're in an air-conditioned building all day or a heated building, or if we're in a place where there's a dry environment, our snot gets clumpy. Or if we're breathing something in that our body perceives as a threat, our body's going to start making more mucus. And if we start using antihistamines and decongestants, all that's doing, there's a time and a place for drugs, but when we use them like that, what we're actually doing is we're stopping our body's immune response. Our body's immune response, if we're breathing in, let's say, a bacteria or virus, is to create more snot, to trap that bacteria, that pathogen, and wash it away before it gets to our lungs. If we go and we take an antihistamine or a decongestant or a steroid, all we're doing is blocking that process. And what we should actually, when you understand the hygiene hypothesis of how that's washing, without overdoing it, what you want to do is you actually want to facilitate that mucus to clear that away. And you can use saline, and this is, that's a great short-term fix. But if you're using something with xylitol, or, there's some other products out there that actually speed up the mucociliary clearance cycle while it's actually keeping the snot fluid. That's really what you want to do, is you want to support your immune system in washing that away.
Is there a way to measure like a healthy snot? I don't know how to say this right, but is there a way to measure like, hey, this is a healthy clearance cycle or this is an unhealthy, other than the obvious, like I can feel that it's dry?
Well, no, you don't want it to be dry. If it's dry, it's not working right.
Right.
What
But
you want it to be, I'm trying to, that's actually a good question. I'm going to have to think about how you do that. I mean, what I would think, I don't think people should, unless you're going in and having some, in fact, I don't even agree with that, but when they're sticking a cotton swab up their nose,
mm-hmm.
I mean, it shouldn't come out covered in boogers. It shouldn't come out covered in blood. It should come out slightly damp. Is
okay.
I mean, I'm trying to think. That's actually a good question. I don't know how you would measure that. Sticking a cotton swab, or sticking your teeth up your nose.
I was just trying to think, like,
I don't know.
That's
our
patients.
A good question.
Our patients are in the chair, right? And we want to be able to have these communications with them about, overall health, nasal passage health. Like, what do we do for, like, is it healthy? Is it
what
not?
I would think is a great way to do it is if they can sit there and breathe through their nose and not hear it happening.
Interesting.
What about patients that have, so there's a lot of patients that have kind of like postnasal drip. So technically their nasal passages are staying, kind of damp, but actually even postnasal drip patients can actually be drier. They're just still dripping a little bit. With patients like that, what does the conversation look like with them? I guess you're just still kind of explaining the benefits of because I love the Xlear nasal spray, but I do have a little bit of postnasal drip, but I still use that nasal spray on a regular basis. But I've never tried to explain that to a patient that maybe doesn't think that they need it because they think that they have enough mucus in their nose, when really it's very thin. It's postnasal drip.
It's measurable, but it's the wrong measure.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's something that the patient needs to work out with their healthcare provider, and for the simple reason that sitting here in the, I can't armchair quarterback, and you probably can't. I mean, probably shouldn't. None of us should try to armchair quarterback, someone else's health issues. If postnasal drip was caused by one factor, it would be easy to do that. Okay, but there's a bunch of different issues that can contribute to that. And somebody should go in and see a healthcare provider about that, because there are solutions for it. Xlear is probably would be helpful. We have a ton of people who use Xlear who say that it helps their postnasal drip. We have others that use it and say that it doesn't really help it.
Yeah. And then you guys also have a whole different line of your nasal sprays, and you've also got the the saline and nasal spray that can be used like in the bottle system in the shower and things like that. I mean, I like to use all of those things. And you've also I most recently bought the rescue spray that's got different ingredients there. Differentiating those a little bit, just for me, can you kind of tell me, do you recommend one over another in an instance?
So each of those have a different use for them. So the basic nasal spray that we have, which is, I don't know if you know the story behind it, but my dad started using that on infants 25 years ago now. But that's a daily hygiene tool. That should be used when you brush your teeth, once in the morning, once at night. If you work in a hospital or maybe a school, or, where you're around a lot of people in a dental office, use it once at lunch too. And the reason for that is that your mucociliary clearance cycle is roughly 3 to 4 hours. And so if you spray that up there, and the way that it works, I guess I should go back and explain the way that it works, is when you spray that up your nose, I know that sounds great, but when you use it, you're putting xylitol into your snot. Okay. And what the xylitol does is, the xylitol we've known for 25 years now, that xylitol blocks strep pneumo, H flu, MCAT, staph. We know now in the past 2 years that it also blocks SARS-CoV-2, it blocks RSV, blocks H1N1. There's other sugar molecules that also help with those. I mean, that's some of the research that we're doing that I think is pretty interesting. And so if you use that every 3 or 4 hours, you're going to have that xylitol in there. And if you're breathing in any of these pathogens, it's going to help block their ability to adhere to the tissue.
That's very helpful, because I didn't even think about, I think just even as a dental provider, I hadn't thought about using that third, kind of like in midday use. It's always been morning and night, but that's a great example of, we are exposed to a lot of different things. So using it midday is a great suggestion.
And the thing is, when you understand that your snot cycle, that mucociliary clearance cycle, it's every 3 or 4 hours. If you're using it more than every 3 or 4 hours, and you still are having issues, it might be that you have another issue going on up there that you could do. And that's where the other things come in. So when we started the company, we only understood how it blocked bacteria. That's what we were talking about. We would go to the physicians and we'd explain, hey, this helps block bacteria in the nasal passage. We started getting a lot of feedback from people that were using it for allergies. Okay. Because, and we didn't understand what was going on there, until we did some more research. And what we realized is that when you spray the xylitol up there, it's not absorbed in the nose. So if you use a saline and you spray that up your nose, after about half an hour, your body actually absorbs the salt and the water's then going to follow it, which means it's going to dry your nose out. And the xylitol, because it's not absorbed, stays in the mucus and it actually pulls moisture out of the tissue, keeping the mucus more fluid. So it gets washed away, traps more bacteria and, viruses, dander, pollen, all that other stuff, and washes it away before you breathe it into your lungs and it affects you. But, that's what's going to happen. It also reduces inflammation, helps you breathe better. But when we started getting all these people talking to us about allergies, we went back and looked at some other things that we could add to it to help people that have, those serious issues or seasonal type of allergies. And so we added some capsaicin to it, which is just a natural low grade, low dose. I mean, it's a natural antihistamine. And so if you know that you're going to have allergies in the spring or that are caused by pollen in the spring or the fall or whatever, you just start using the Xlear Max during that time frame, just like you would use a regular Xlear. Okay. And what we found is that a lot of people, they don't have to use as much of their antihistamines. They don't have to use as much as their OTC allergy medications. And again, I've said this before, we agree that there is a time and a place for, antihistamines, decongestants, and steroids. We just think that they're way overused and, bad things come when things are used incorrectly. The rescue product, that actually came about because so in the past 25 years, I've been sick once. And I had a sinus infection and I'm like, yeah, I'm sick. I go to the doctor. The doctor, you have a sinus infection. You go to the doctor. They give you amoxicillin. I get the amoxicillin and I'm driving home. And I'm about to take this systemic antibiotic. And I'm like, I have a sinus infection in my head. Why am I taking an antibiotic that's going to go into my gut and screw up my gut microbiome? Why am I doing this? And I called my dad, obviously a physician. And I said, Dad, why am I taking a systemic antibiotic for a localized sinus infection? And he goes, I don't know. That's a good question. I said, can you find me a nasal spray that's an antibiotic? I mean, I might as well just put it right there and knock it down there. And my dad goes, yeah, give me a minute. He calls me back like an hour later and he's like, they don't make any. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, there's not a nasal spray that's an antibiotic. And I'm like, well, that's kind of dumb. And he goes, I agree. That is. Why don't we have one? And I did something, and I'm telling you right now, do not do this. Don't do it at home. Don't ever do it. But I opened up a bottle of Xlear and I poured one of my capsules of amoxicillin into it. And I sprayed that up my nose. My sinus infection was gone the next morning when I woke up.
Wow.
Nothing. The reason why you don't want to do that is because amoxicillin is incredibly unstable in water. And if I had done that the next morning, I probably would have had some very different results. So don't do that. But what we did do is we actually looked at that, and in working with a couple of doctors, we came up and said, you know what? If you need something that's going to help reduce the bacterial load when you have a pathogen, what do you use? You put in oregano oil, tea tree oil, eucalyptus, you put in an antifungal, and that's what the rescue is. So it's designed to help go up there and clean it out and knock down that bacterial load even better than what the regular Xlear does. And then the rinse bottle, the positive pressure, the high volume rinse, that's actually something that we don't encourage people to use that often. If you're using it more than once or twice a month, we think that leads to bigger issues. But where people should use it is when their doctor tells them to do it after, they have surgery or something up there, or if they really have some pretty bad allergies that are causing a lot of congestion. The FTC, our great and glorious government, is suing us right now because we're sharing this kind of science. It's science, it's published in the medical literature, but there's actually a number of studies where they've actually taken patients that have COVID, because one of the symptoms of COVID is massive amounts of mucus. And there was a study that was done, paid for by the NIH at Vanderbilt University in early 2020, where they had 60 people that had COVID, and all they did was use saline irrigation. They all had COVID, they all tested positive, they all had symptoms, and every one of them was better in under a week.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and there have been a number of studies like that. There was another one out of Georgia where just using salt water reduced their hospitalization by 8x.
Wow.
And we went out and shared this stuff. It's not even our product, but those are the times where using a high volume, high lavage like that should be used. But the issue of people that use it every day, once in the morning, once at night, because what you're doing when you do that is you're cleaning out that entire protective layer of mucus. We talked about that earlier. You have this very thin layer of mucus sitting on top of the cilia that's trapping everything. And if you wash that away, then all of the underlying tissue is right there exposed to anything you're breathing in. And it takes 3 to 4 hours for your body to produce the mucus to replace that. So anything you breathe in over the next 3 to 4 hours, open access to all the underlying tissue.
Yikes. Wow. You gotta be careful with that then.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so helpful. I mean, thank you for kind of differentiating all of those and when and how to use all of that. I think that was super helpful for me to hear, and I'm sure for listeners to hear too. And we really appreciate you being on, and congratulations again. It was great to have you on and sharing everything about Xlear. You guys are doing such amazing things. How can the listeners learn more?
We, as a company, we have a couple of we have 3 hygienists that is their job, is to go out and educate about what xylitol is, how it works. They have a couple of recorded webinars that they could come and get CE credit for watching. And if they finish I think there's 1 or 2, maybe 3 of those that are recorded, they're happy to go and set up live webinars and explain anything, have any questions, and explain all of the science behind xylitol. We even have them talk about erythritol and some of these other sugars and how they play a role in helping to maintain a healthy microbiome.
And if I can also advocate, there's a great Facebook group. I believe Julie's in charge of that one. It's just called the Xlear Facebook group. So if people wanted to ask questions in there, it's been very helpful for me. And I think you can see who the newbies are when they come in, they ask a question, and then they get the really good science advice, which is really nice too. All right. Thank you so much again for being on. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of 2 hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of 2 hygienists.